Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Now for today's video, I wanted to talk about the franchise as a whole. This entails all the films, the 2 original novels, and all of the respective supplementary material that surrounds it. And the reason I wanted to have a discussion on all of the stuff is primarily because of Isla Nublar, or more importantly, the usage of Isla Nublar. Now, we all know that this particular island was blown up and destroyed in the latest installment in the film series, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Mount Sibo finally blew, most of the dinosaurs were killed off in the subsequent eruption, and what survivors remained were eventually shipped out to the mainland by the Arcadia. Every one of us knows all of this stuff by now. But the ultimate reason as to why this happened in Fallen Kingdom is something that I actually think needs to be discussed, particularly by those of us who have read through Michael Crichton's original novels and watched every entry in the series a solid number of times. In fact, the entire reason I felt some sort of inspiration to make this video stems from a recent marathon that I did with all 5 of the movies. Now before the last couple of weeks, I had actually never sat down and watched all 5 films back to back in a row over the course of a few days. I had attempted to do it before when we only had the first 3 films, but this was before Jurassic World had even been released, so it's been quite a while. Most of the time I'd watch them independently of one another and not really think of popping in the next installment. However, it was during this legit marathon through the series that I actually started to form quite a lot of things to say about the franchise as a whole. Now, before we begin going over anything, we need to address the big reality that a shocking amount of people seem to be unaware of. Jurassic Park is a movie directed by Steven Spielberg in 1993 that was based on a book. That book is very different to the final film that was released. It's not a completely different story, but it is a noticeably streamlined version of its source material. A few notable examples that need to be addressed are pretty obvious. The book starts off with a compy attack on the mainland where a little girl is bitten by a Procompsognathus that's managed to make its way to Costa Rica. The carcass of the compy is later retrieved by a novel-only character, Martin Gutierrez, who decides to do some research into what kind of creature this could be. Now, all of this eventually leads us to the island, Isla Nublar, where we join Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, Ian Malcolm, Donald Gennaro, and everyone else who have all shown up to experience John Hammond's secret Jurassic Park. Now, even though a lot of that sounds rather similar to the movie, it's important for me to point out that an entire subplot was actually going on within the original novel that never shows up in the movie Jurassic Park whatsoever. That subplot was entirely centered around Grant's mission to radio a boat that was headed back to the mainland. He desperately tries to hail them in the book because he finds out that the ship had some small velociraptors on board. The raptors are later found out to have been stowing away on boats for some time, once all of the other characters find their hidden nests around the volcanic portion of the island. Here the dinosaurs wait for the cargo ships that ferry their way over to Nublar and actually plan a systemic migration that will eventually lead all of them to the jungles of Costa Rica. At the very end of the book, it's made clear that compies, velociraptors, and God knows what else actually have been living on the mainland for some time now. And they've even begun moving through the jungles of these lands and becoming a major concern for the local government. In fact, John Hammond's work on Jurassic Park was such a serious problem for the government in the book that the Costa Rican Air Force actually napalms the island at the end of the story. Once the survivors are flown out via helicopter, huge jets fly over Nublar and drop a ton of firebombs over the jungles. They do this in an effort to kill off all of the dinosaurs that Hammond had created. So when you go back and watch the ending of the original movie after having read the book, you can really see the stark contrast in what the storylines are trying to convey here. In the book, Nublar was destroyed and wiped off of the face of the earth, with the story ending on the terrible reality that dinosaurs are out in the wilds of the civilized world. In the film, Nublar is left untouched and abandoned while Grant and the others peacefully fly away towards the sunset. That's not exactly the same. Of course, I'm sure everyone has heard by now the remarks by some that Jurassic Park should never have had a sequel, and that the movie wraps itself up in a way that no sequel was ever really needed. Well, factually speaking, a second movie was never really not in the discussion of being made. In fact, before that original book was even published, the movie rights for 6 Jurassic Park films were contracted off for Steven Spielberg and Universal. Spielberg has even gone on record saying numerous times that he left a specific setup for a sequel in the first movie during Dennis Nedry's death scene.
I never split any hairs about, do I want to make a sequel to Jurassic Park? Of course I wanted to make a sequel to Jurassic Park. It was just when. I somehow liked that idea, and we never really exploited it, but that can of shaving cream that had the DNA of about 8 species of dinosaur. When I was making the first movie, I thought if there's going to be a sequel, it's going to have to be about the retrieval of that can of shaving lotion. And that's how they bring the dinosaurs back. I mean, that's why I did the shot in the movie. But it wound up that Michael Crichton's second book went into an entirely different philosophy about how to reintroduce the dinosaurs. And so I went along with Michael's instincts, and that can is still buried there somewhere, just waiting to rear about 8 ugly heads for another Jurassic Park movie.
Now, of course, they never made that movie at all, and instead it got turned into a game. But the fact of the matter still stands that Jurassic Park was always made with the idea of sequels in mind. This is one of the reasons that I've always been confused over the amount of articles that say that it should never have been a franchise. Historically speaking, it was designed to be one. It all just sounds really pretentious to me, to be honest. Speaking of sequels, The Lost World would come out in 1997, and proved to be a rather divisive one. Upon the film's release, I was a massive fan of the original movie, and after not being allowed to go see it in theaters because of my parents fearing that it may be too scary, I thankfully got to see it as soon as it hit VHS, where it not only scared the hell out of me, but also made me a massive Lost World fan. Unfortunately, this did not work for everyone in the audience at the time, because in 1995, Crichton had released his sequel novel, The Lost World, for the older demographic to have fun with and read through. And regardless of how anyone feels about any particular movie, the fact of the matter is that the Lost World film was drastically different from its novel counterpart. In fact, it was so different that many fans that were a little bit older than me really didn't like it at the time. Arjun Bose, who some of you may know for his great work in making radio plays for the Jurassic Park fandom, as well as working quite a lot with the Jurassic Park podcast, has even admitted that when Lost World first came out, he really found himself not liking it too much, and he even found it to be extremely disappointing. Now, over the years, he's grown to really like the second movie, and will tell you that firsthand if you ever talk to him. But the cold reality is that when the second film hit theaters, it did not garner the same kind of reaction that Jurassic Park did. One of the striking differences from the two mediums was the fact that at the end of the Lost World movie, Isla Sorna is left intact as a dinosaur preserve, with all of the animals living happily ever after without any major problems. Well, in the book, that couldn't be further from the truth. Michael Crichton ends his Lost World novel with a dark impending doom said to fall upon all of the clones. Genetically speaking, every animal would be doomed to die on Site B and face the second extinction of the dinosaurs. A virus would plague Isla Sorna and eventually wipe out everything it came into contact with. Life did not find a way. Once you add this to the long list of other differences between the second book and film, you realize that Spielberg's Lost World honestly has barely anything to do with Crichton's, which is what pissed off a lot of book fans in 1997. Another complaint that critics had with The Lost World upon its initial release was the fact that the beginning of the movie had chosen to set up this entirely new island that we'd never heard of before. In the book, Crichton did this out of necessity because he literally blew up Nublar in the first novel. But in the film adaptation, Isla Nublar is left untouched and safe from human harm at all, which caused many critics to wonder why they wanted to adapt the whole second island portion of the book while simultaneously throwing everything else out. Nublar wasn't destroyed, so naturally it seemed logical for the filmmakers to just move the Lost World over there. However, as we all know, this is not what eventually happened. There is a deleted scene from the second movie that actually goes over what happened to the first island, but I'm going to talk about that in a wholly separate video in order to keep things simple. Factoring in all of this criticism though, Jurassic Park 3 was met with a similar response in 2001, which is kind of ironic because that movie was, in a lot of ways, designed to be the anti-Lost World. Early interviews with Joe Johnston during the production of JP3 quoted the director with saying the following: "The only thing that Steven had said to me about it was that the problem for him with the second film was that everyone who went there was a specialist. Everyone who was on the island knew why they were going. They knew there were dinosaurs there that could eat them. They all had these agendas. Jeff Goldblum had the only agenda that didn't involve the dinosaurs. He wanted to get his girlfriend back. The first one was so great because the people had no idea what they were getting into. I think Steven was always conscious of needing to go back in that direction. I wanted it to be very successful, well-liked, entertaining, and fun. And I wanted it to be the third one in the series and not just repeat or be completely different. I always saw it as an opportunity, and to be perfectly frank with you, if the second movie had been an improvement on the first, I probably wouldn't have been here." At this point in time, a major complaint started to arise from various critics. The issue many took with the films is that they all had too similar of a setup and ending climax. In Jurassic Park, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3, every film in that trilogy starts off with a compelling reason to go to the island. In the first film, it was because of the raptor attack. In The Lost World, it was a rescue mission. And in Jurassic Park 3, it was also a rescue mission. And just as true as it is that all of the films start off with a new reason to go back to the islands, they also boiled down to the same kind of drama surrounding said islands. In Jurassic Park, they had to reboot the system and radio in a helicopter to escape. In The Lost World, they had to make their way to the operations building to radio in a helicopter and escape. And in JP3, they had to find the satellite phone in order to call someone for help and eventually escape. Needless to say, critics had a field day with the series once the first trilogy ended in 2001. The major complaints being that all of these films always had some sort of contrived way for the people to go back to the island and eventually fly away in a helicopter. Now, while I will say that I think it may have been pushing it a bit too far with JP3, I'll also acknowledge the fact that The Lost World did manage to give us something different when they took the T-Rex to San Diego, which of course critics hated as well. I always stuck up for you, Lost World. You're A-okay in my book. That being said, the movies that were initially released in the 90s and early 2000s were quite different from their source material. Dinosaurs never really made it to the mainland outside of the brief T-Rex attack in San Diego, and that eventually ended with the dinosaur being shipped back off to Site B, where none of the other dinosaurs died and all of them lived in peace. Well, fast forward to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and things start to look very different. Early on in the film, it's said that Nublar's volcano, Mount Sibo, is due to erupt at any moment.
Geologists now predict an extinction-level event will kill off the last living dinosaurs on the planet.
Now, if the volcano is going to kill off all of the remaining dinosaurs that live on the planet, that means Nublar is the only place with any dinosaurs on it, which means that Site B doesn't exactly have any left. Or at least that's what the public has been led to believe. Around this early portion of the film, Ian Malcolm is seen debating with the United States government on why he believes the animals should be left there to die. And lo and behold, they actually listen to him. The government decides that they will not go into Nublar and relocate any of the animals because Ian Malcolm told them that it was a bad idea. After we reach the end of the first act of this new movie, Nublar is blown up, and all of the remaining dinosaurs that happen to get captured are caged away on a ship and headed for the mainland. Once the film ends, we see that there are no more islands to go back to, and the focus has instead shifted to the animals that have run into the wilds of the civilized world. You see, the entire idea of Fallen Kingdom killing off Isla Nublar and moving the dinosaurs to our own backyards was something that came about for two very distinct reasons. Reason number one is obviously because of the very critical responses that the first three films got. Coming up with a way for someone to go back to a dinosaur-infested island has never been accepted as one of the Jurassic Park series' strong points. Reason number two is intrinsically tied to the original source material. Narratively speaking, both books conclude with their respective islands being destroyed. The first book and much of the first half of the second even go into extensive detail on what's happening outside of the islands as far as dinosaur invasion goes. Babies are eaten alive by compies, raptors have planned an elaborate migration, and ornitholestes bodies have to be tracked down by the government and burned with flamethrowers before anyone can see them. Malcolm makes a large map of the modern world with pins depicting all of the reported sightings of what Crichton called aberrant forms. The dinosaurs had broken out of their island prisons. They'd gotten away from these places despite both areas getting obliterated in their respective entries. Due to the critical response of the first JP sequels, and due to the fact that the books had never really been properly adapted, Isla Nublar had to die in order for newer stories to be told that were wholly different than what had come before. Of course, this doesn't mean that it would change any critic's outlook in the blink of an eye. Keep in mind that The Lost World was heavily criticized for a great many things, including character development, pacing, individuals' issues with the film's logic, and other such oddities. So simply bypassing the fact that they don't have to go to or get off of an island doesn't leave everyone in agreement. Widgetwall's review from 1997 even stated the following: "It was inevitable that they would make a sequel, but did it have to be this one? The only thing that can be said for this Spielbergian bastard child is that it wasn't as bad as the book, which read like the original novel run through a washer dryer and then slapped with a different title. Rather than take the obvious and possibly more plausible road and go back to the same island, which in the book was destroyed but not the film, no, let's make a totally different island but redo the same film." Similarly, Barbara Schulgasser wrote this: Most of the writing is the blandest sort of twaddle jokes you can practically recite along with actors. Sarah reassures Malcolm, "I've worked with predators for 20 years. Lions, tigers, hyenas, you. Ha, ha." Aside from the fact that these scientists walk goofily into obvious danger, as if they hadn't seen the highly educational Spielberg danger manual Jaws on television 100 times, there is a matter of continually switching instructions regarding for whom we're supposed to root. In the first movie, when the dinosaurs attacked people, we were on the people's side. This time, when the dinosaurs start attacking the predatory zookeeping humans, we are expected to root for the dinosaurs. Shortly after, we are ordered to turn around and root for the humans again. And James O'Ailey had this to say in '97. When the Sarah Harding character played by Julianne Moore walks around with a blood-smeared jacket leaving trails of blood all over on the plants, trees, etc., we in the audience know that it is a stupid thing to do. But none of the other characters seem to think so. Not even the world-renowned big game hunter played by Pete Postlethwaite. But it is allowed to happen because there has to be yet another attack by a T-Rex to fill in some screen time. Yes, the characters in The Lost World are even more cardboard than those in the first film. But what is even worse is that the dinosaurs are also cardboard cutouts. They have no attitude. At least we had two street punk-like velociraptors towards the end of the previous movie, but the dinosaurs in The Lost World might as well be any old monster. Now, after reading all of that, I want to make one thing clear. This doesn't mean that every individual person is bound to hate on each sequel that gets released in the future. Andrew L. Urban had this to say about The Lost World in 1997. All the elements are there, suspenseful plot with plenty of action, interesting lead performances, terrific production values, and a wonderful beefy musical score, plus of course the fantastic special effects that bring these extinct gigantic reptiles of all sizes to the big screen. The technology is so advanced that these mythical creatures exude a character and personality of their own. The flocks of small bird-like Compsognathus especially captured my imagination with their childlike hops and deadly predator-esque behavior. And the T-Rexes, well, they're glass-eating gymnasts. There is plenty of adrenaline-pumping tension, and we are startled most when we expect it least. Spielberg is a master at work with our emotions. The script is sharp and witty, with most of the good lines going to Jeff Goldblum, whose dry, laconic performance is simply outstanding. The strong presence of Pete Postlethwaite as the exhilarated hunter, sporting an earring and a shaved head, adds an extra dimension. Take a ride to the Lost World. It's quite a trip. Andrew, I think we're best friends. Critical opinions on these films are honestly all over the place. An easy way to prove this is by doing a quick Google search with the words, "The Lost World Underrated." In 20 years' time, it is fascinating to see how many people not only disagree with the initial consensus of the second film, but also how some people will vehemently deny that the movie deserves to be listed as underrated at all. So while as a book fan, I'm very happy to see the destruction of Nublar play out on the big screen, I will admit that they should probably think twice if they believe that people are going to treat the movie any differently than what's come before. What I wanted to address in this video was simply the reason why Isla Nublar was destroyed and why the dinosaurs were moved to the mainland. When the Jurassic World trilogy ends, we're going to be left with 6 films that tell an interesting story that utilizes a lot of stuff that comes directly from the mind of Michael Crichton. After having watched all 5 movies in a row, the overarching story of Jurassic feels fascinating to discuss. I don't know exactly how it's going to end, but once you start at Jurassic Park and work your way through to Fallen Kingdom, things really get interesting. So now that I've gone through all of that, I'd love to know what the discussion is like. With the news that Jeff Goldblum, Laura Dern, and more than likely Sam Neill will be joining Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard in the new film, what do you think the final movie in the saga will look like? Are you someone who thinks that a Jurassic movie should only be about going to and getting off of an island? Or are you of the opinion that moving the series away from Nublar and Sorna is a good thing? No matter what your opinion is on any of these films, or even books for that matter, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. Now before I go, I want to thank all of my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. Wes Mordine, David, and Ben Hall. Words can't really express how awesome it is to have you guys tell me how much you enjoy the stuff I do, and I seriously am extremely thankful for everything that you guys do to help. Honestly, it means the world. Now I'd like to thank you all for watching this video, and hope that you all enjoyed today's content. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like and hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in hearing from me again. I'll see you all in the next video, guys, and as always, take it easy.